Good morning.
Good morning.
You on?
Good morning. Parshas
Toldos.
Toldos. You know, when you want to mention that something is not kosher, what do you say? It's treif. Shtik chazer. That's what you say. Now, the chazer, the pig, is not the only non-kosher species. I've never heard anyone say that's a shtik camel, meaning camel's not kosher. Have you ever heard anyone say that's a shtik rabbit? That's what you say when you see a shtreimel. Why did the chazer become the symbol of non-kosher?
Split hoof, so pretends to be kosher.
Very good. Okay, so that's the answer. So
Kosher
we'll give you the answer.
Kosher chazer fish.
The chazer is unique because to identify a species as non-kosher, you have an animal lacking the kosher signs. Kosher signs, the two kosher signs, split hoof and the fact that they choose its cut. CUR. Okay. So, it's interesting that you mentioned the CUR because when the CUR building on Dufferin, it's above a red lobster. They say that the red lobster is under the COR. No.
Does Masorah come into kosher in animals as well? Masorah.
Masorah.
Like Masorah, you can eat a certain fish because you have Masorah.
Oh, there's tradition. The idea of tradition that you have to have a tradition for a kosher species related specifically to birds.
Birds and fish.
Birds, not really fish. You don't need a tradition. In other words, if I go fishing, and I find something that it has its fins and scales, or the truth is only the scales.
Yeah, but there's that one fish that has the fins and scales underwater when you lift it.
Sheds it.
So
Correct.
that's the Masorah, isn't it?
Well, you have to know, the science a little bit of it before, But our chazer, we're going to focus on our chazer. The chazer became the symbol of non-kosher because it has the external kosher signs. It has its split hoofs. It doesn't chew its cud. And the message there is this idea that in Judaism, there is nothing more harmful than having external signs of being good when in essence you are not. That's true corruption in our tradition, right? As the Talmud tells us, that you have to be careful perhaps with the Sadducees, but be far more careful with people that externally show themselves to be righteous, but deep down are corrupt. This is what and therefore the chazer, the other non-kosher animals like the camel, the hare, the rabbit, those are lacking the external kosher signs. So they're not kosher, but you don't get the title shtik chazer only if you have the external only. This is what we are being told. Now, in our tradition, there is one individual that got the title as the chazer. He became known as the chazer in rabbinic tradition. Who is the chazer? Now, please don't yell out anyone you're thinking of specifically, but it's Esav. It's Esav. Esav had this flaw. Therefore, he is the symbol of spiritual corruption because he has external signs. He would like to show others that he is kosher, he is good. Right? He is continuing with traditions. He has attributes that therefore he deserves to be treated as a leader and you should learn from him. But when you get to know him, deep down you know that you're dealing with a corrupt individual that adapts or adopts really the most corrupt behavior. That's what's happening inside. Externally he shows signs of being good. That is Esav. And Esav is compared to the Chazir. So in this week's Parsha, when we're going to be introduced to this individual, what we're going to try to figure out is, number one, what are those external signs that he's trying to show? What kind of behaviors was he trying to show? What were his quote-unquote external kosher signs? And then we're going to try to understand what his essence is and who he got it from. In other words, he really adopted it from someone else, some attitude that we're going to find in this week's Parsha, and we're going to understand why it's mentioned in this week's Parsha, because it becomes the core of Esav. So turn to page...
Is he formally described as a chazir in rabbinic tradition?
Yeah, there's Midrashim, Yachar Semeno Chazir Meya'ar. There's a pasuk in Tehillim, and the rabbis say, you want to know who that is? That is Esav. Because he is a man that is lacking all values. But then he turned 40. When he became 40, right, he had, I don't know, it was a midlife crisis. They lived longer then. But he had a third life crisis. And he says to himself, hey, I got to do something. So he says, hey, wait a second. My dad got married at age 40. So that must be a good practice to show people that I am like my dad. So at age 40, he goes ahead and he marries a few wives. Okay, that's what he does to show his righteousness. Again, something external. Something to show others. Deep down, boy, does he have some serious issues. So now, the fact is that we have in this parsha, but just to review briefly the structure of the parsha. The parsha begins with a review of the history of Yitzchak, the fact that he marries Rivka, the fact that there is difficulty in having children, and eventually when she does conceive, she's carrying there's a battle within her womb, and she goes and she gets told 2 nations are going to split from you. Yaakov and Esav are born, and then Yaakov purchases, he buys off of Esav the right of the firstborn. I've had this with my older brother several times. We've gone to shuls, and they asked him, and they wanted to give an aliyah to one of us, and he would give it to him. My older brother would say, I sold the first, I sold my bachora to him, right? Waiting for the inheritance one day, from my dad perhaps, and then we'll go ahead and prove to them that it's not so worthwhile to sell it. But he's obviously joking. But the idea is that the firstborn, the right, the responsibility that was carried by Avram Yitzchak, Esav has no interest. Fine. Then we have a section where he deals with the Philistines, which we're going to analyze in depth. But now turn to page 132, to the end of the page, and this is after these events with the Philistines. And here we are told, this is what I mentioned in verse 34. Vayesab ben arba'im shana. The Torah is spelling out that for some reason Esav gets married at age 40, and he marries 2 women. Why does he marry these 2 specific women? No, now just to analyze the names, you have to realize that Esav wants to show that he is like a carrier of tradition externally. He's like the grandfather. He's like his father. And his father and grandfather were people who had an impact in the society around them in their own way. Well, Avraham Avinu was a person who rejected Avodah Zarah. He was trying to tell everyone that you should know that there is a God and we have a responsibility of being thankful to this God. And in rabbinic tradition we say that whoever rejects idolatry is called a Yehudi. You think about it, our title are Yehudim. Why specific Yehudim? So we'll say, well, we are descendants of the tribe of Yehuda. Well, I'm turning to some Levim here, I'm looking at them and I ask them, do you consider yourself a Yehudi? And you will say, yes. Guess what? You are not a descendant of the tribe of Yehuda, right? You are a descendant of Levi. Why do you call yourself a Yehudi? So it must be that there's more of a reason for it. So Yehudi relates to Hoda'ah, being thankful to God. When you are thankful to someone, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to the higher authority. So the Talmud tells us that a person who rejects Avodah Zarah basically was that if I dance in a specific way, I'm going to have rain. Right? If I burn a specific individual alive, then the produce of the field will be awesome. That's what Avodah Zarah is. All I got to do is manipulate the spiritual realm. That's what it's all about. Judaism says no. You have to reject that. You have to be a Yehudi, lehodot, to be thankful to God. And when you are thankful, you feel a responsibility to make the world the way God likes it and wants it. The first word we say in the morning, by the way, Modeh. That's how we start. That's the Jewish life. Being thankful to this awesome, incredible world, and realize that we have a responsibility to this magnificent existence. That's a Yehudi. And that's Avraham Avinu. What is he doing? He has his wells. What were the wells for? Because when you have water in that region, that's where people come. People come, he is able to reach out, to inspire them, to teach them. He was a person, Avraham Avinu was a person who was a Yehudi by the Be'er, by the well. That's what he achieved, fine. Now, let's remember a little bit, Yitzchak's a different personality. Yitzchak is a very spiritual man. And after Shabbos, what do we do when we lose our soul, that extra soul that we had on Shabbat, and we want to go ahead and have something that we could pull through with it? We need psamim. Psamim. There's something very spiritual. It's considered like a spiritual sense. You smell it, and it gives you pleasure. And by the way, you have to remember that Yitzchak, afterwards, when he's blessing Yaakov, and he smells Vayarech et Reach Begadav, he smells the aroma of the clothes, were somehow able to inspire Yitzchak to give that bracha to his son. It's a spiritual sense. Reach Gan Eden nichnas imod. Reach is spiritual. So this is Yitzchak. He became a very spiritual individual. Now, what experience made Yitzchak spiritual and really detached from the world? There's a midrash that says that Yitzchak's difficulty with his vision was because when he was laying on the altar, what happened? The angels cried, right? Odds are that the tears did not actually fall from heaven. So what does the midrash yes mean? The midrash is telling us that he reached such a spiritual level when he's up there on the altar that he couldn't interact with the physical world. It's like the Rebbe that they would bring in the olden days to Sunday schools from the Altaheim, from the old country. And you would put them there, and boy, what some of you guys did to these people, because they were from not just a different era and a different country, but from a different planet, right? And if you would talk to them about Babe Ruth, and you would talk to them about Joe DiMaggio, they would have no clue what you are talking about. They were indeed detached from the physical world as we know it. That was Yitzchak after that experience. He has that experience. Now, by the way, he was not the offering. He wasn't burnt on that altar. What was burnt on that altar instead of him? An ayil. So he is a man that's in the psamim realm, right? In the psamim realm, in aroma, and in the realm of the ram. So now, let's go back to Esav. Esav is externally trying to show, I am like my parents. I'm like my father. I'm like my grandfather. I'm a righteous individual. Externally, he wants to show it. So at age 40, he marries 2 women. And if you look at the names of these women, you realize that there's something there. There's a message there about what he was trying to do. He wanted to show, look, this one is, what's the name of the first one? She's a Yehudit, the daughter of Be'eri. She has the attributes. It's possible, by the way, that these were not the actual names, but the Torah is telling us that what he was trying to do was to bring this woman and show the parents, look how righteous she is. She reminds me of Zaidi, right? She reminds me of she reminds me of Avraham Avinu because she's mamish a Yehudit. And she look what she did by the well the other day. She talked about God and values. That was wife number 1, but she was really a Chiti. She was a local girl, and these were not exactly the ideal wives for the builders of the Jewish nation. And the other wife, wanting to show that she is like Yitzchak, she's a very spiritual woman. She's more like us. She's a basmat. She's like Bosem. She is like the aroma, like Dad, who is very spiritual. And she too is inspired by the event with the ayil, with the Elon. Ayil. Aha. That's the external Esav, trying to show everyone I'm just like my parents. That is what Esav is about, and therefore he is the Chazer. Now it seems to be that Yitzchak does not recognize to what extent this individual is a problem, and was hoping to give him a series of blessings. Not the dynastic blessings of being like Avraham Avinu. That was never his intention. Because if you look at the end, when Yaakov walks in as Yaakov, that's when he says to him, V'yiten lachad berkat Avraham, you should carry the blessing of Abraham. You should be Jewish continuity. but nevertheless he wanted Esav to be blessed and perhaps some kind of partnership between the two. Rivka senses that it will not work. It's simply not going to work. So therefore, we have Yaakov running away. That's the end of the parsha. But what is in the core? What's in the middle of this portion? So that's where we're going to have to turn to. And if you turn to page 128 in chapter 26, we're going to develop a little bit of an appreciation for the essence. Now that we know what Esav is trying to show, now let's figure out what he adapted. And how do I know he adapted it? Because world history and Jewish history is going to prove it to me. So now, what happens is in chapter 26 is that there is a famine in the land. Where does Yitzchak go? To the south, to Gerar. Okay, who does he have to interact with?
Avimelech.
Avimelech. Now Yitzchak in his mind thinks to himself, my father had a crisis once with a famine. Where did he go? Egypt. Perhaps. If dad did it, if it's good for dad, it's good for me as well. So where does he have intention to make his way to? Egypt. Comes the Almighty, and the Almighty tells him in verse 2 here, and he tells him, Al tered Mitzrayim. Nope. You are the chosen patriarch. You, just as you have one wife, which is the ideal, you are not leaving the land of Israel. This is where you belong because this is the ideal state of a Jew in Israel. That's how it should be.
But then Yaakov left.
Yaakov was not the ideal Jew. Yaakov was, the Jew that had to go to exile. That symbolizes our extended journey and difficulties. And in verse 3, he says to him straight out, Gur ba'aretz hazot, live in this land, right? You're going to go ahead and sojourn in this land. God will be with you. And I'm going to bless you. And these are going to be your land. This is going to be your land. I will increase your descendants in the merit of Avraham. Fine. So let's move on to verse 7. And obviously, again, there's the issue with the wife, which we are familiar with. And Avimelech was critical of him. Next page, verse 12. This was, remember, not the best of years. And what the yield of the fields is quite limited. But somehow this Jew comes. When everyone else is planting and expecting X amount, he gets 100X. Somehow the Jew is able to take an area that was not producing too much for others, perhaps could support the local farmer to take care of his own basic needs, perhaps of his family, and this Jew walks in, and guess what happens? The yield is Vayizra, verse 12. Vayizra Yitzchak ba'aretz ahi. He goes ahead, Yitzchak, and he sows the land in that year, meaning this was not such a good year. And again, in that land, in that year, and the amount was 100-fold, Mea Sha'arim. 100 Sha'arim are at gates. Sha'ar is a gate. What were occurring in gates? There was a lot of activity in the gates of a city. You had a judge at a gate of a city, and therefore the marketplace would be there, and he would be dealing with issues between people. And they had weights and measurements for people to know how much is a pound, or how much is a se'ah, and how much is an amah. So when you want to talk about a measurement, it is the measurement that's found by the gate. So therefore, he found me'ah she'arim, 100 measurements he got. The yield was 100 times more than what you would expect. How does that happen that the Jew walks into an area that for others the production is shvachamais, this is weak, and the yield is so great? How does this happen? It's interesting that I'm reading about a fellow by the name of Elwood Mead. You ever hear of the Hoover Dam? You've been there? Of course. So there's next to it, there's Lake Mead. Lake Mead. Lake Mead is named after Mr. Elwood Mead. Elwood Mead is an expert on soil and irrigation, and he plays a very significant role with the building of the Hoover Dam. And then at some point, I think in the 30s or 40s, he makes his way to Palestine. And he falls in love with the Zionists. And he himself...
Was he Jewish?
Nope. And he writes that when it comes to the indifferent Arabs, right, they'll plant, but their concern is not for the welfare of the land. They don't feel that it's their land. They just go ahead, produce, the sheep will come, eat, graze, nothing left here, move on to the next location. And he called the practices and the behavior of the Arab population in Palestine as ones who abuse the environment. And they deforested the land. They drained it from its vital resources. Because what were they interested in? Taking care of today. And in his words, he mentions that all they do is they talk about inshallah. Allah gives, but Allah gives for today. There's no concern for developing the land. They never see themselves as connected nationally to this land. On the other hand, the Zionists, it's amazing. They are coming in and they have a desire to actually build a society. They are producing far more. They are able to yield from the land far more because they feel an attachment to that land. That's what he knows. And he says that you should know, in my opinion, this in the perhaps late 1930s, 1940s, that one day the land of Israel could be a replica of Southern California. Now, I don't know to what extent I want it to be a replica of Southern California.
Wine.
Silicon Valley, we're okay. The wine is, you see, we go through a long list here. Traffic, like Los Angeles. So now, this was what he knows. So the idea of the Jew walking in and succeeding and bringing blessing to a land is quite incredible. It happened then, it happened now. So these individuals, now there was another fellow that also, similar background, his name was Walter Laudermilk, not Powdermilk, Laudermilk, Nishtayid, actually was able to see even an interview that they interviewed him about his Palestine, again, an expert in soil, an expert in irrigation, who, his words, Laudermill, about the Arabs, that they are the morgue of civilization. That's what he feels. And he wrote the most remarkable devotion to reclaim the land by the Zionists is something that I have not seen in any other country of the New or Old world. He was simply in awe. People who came and see Jews, and these are experts in this field, and they see what they were doing due to their commitment, due to the feeling that they have of attachment to this land. He was in awe of what they are achieving. And both of them felt that this is something that will elevate the whole region, because obviously the result is going to be that the other locals, the Arabs, are going to see how much blessing came to the land with the Zionists, and they will realize how it's going to be a boon to the economy, and it will go ahead and develop the whole area. So this would be good for the whole Middle East, obviously, right? That's the result that you expect when one person comes into an area, trickle-down economics, everyone does benefit. So let's turn to the Chumash. What happens? So he is blessed in verse 13, and look at verse 14. What does he has? Vaigdal haish, and he has Vailo mikne tzon, mikne bakar, avodah rabba. Complete success Yitzchak has. God tells him, this is your land. He feels attached to this land. He is doing for the sake of land. Obviously, it's the hand from above is assisting him. But at the end of verse 14, we see a reaction that no one could imagine. How do they react to Jewish success? They are jealous. Can you believe it? Of all things, instead of being appreciative that finally someone is being successful in this region, they are jealous. And jealousy comes with actions. Verse 15, they begin the process of what? Filling in wells, right? Filling in life, right? When you fill in a well, you're not just hurting the other, you are hurting yourself. When you burn, when you create terrorism through fire, you're not just hurting others, you're actually hurting yourself. But if you don't feel that attachment to the land, no, the main goal is to hurt the others. If it's anti-Semitism, it doesn't have to be rational. You're not concerned about yourself. You have one simple goal, to hurt the other. So this is what's happening here. And now in verse 16, what happens? Vayomer Avimelech el Yitzchak. What's next when the Jew succeeds? Lech me'imanu ki atzamta mimeno me'od. Get out of here, right? You have to go away because you have become much mightier than us. But even though the words themselves can be translated as atzamta mimeno, you are mightier than us, but it can also be read as atzamta, that your strength, your success, your financial gains is mimeno, from us. You took it from us. Anything the Jew has, it is because he took it in a way that he shouldn't. I'll tell you a story that I was once in Milwaukee, going back around 20 years ago. And I'm on a bus, a public bus in Milwaukee, for whatever reason, I have to return a car to the airport, and I'm in the public transportation system in Milwaukee. And if you know a little bit of Milwaukee, you can imagine, if you can't imagine, think South Side Chicago. In other words, you could envision the type of people. So I'm sitting on the bus, and a fellow sits next to me, an African American, and he looks me up and then says, "Oh, you're Jewish, huh?" I say, "Yeah, I'm Jewish." I says to him, "You should know, I never met a Jew that wasn't rich." Okay, fine, welcome. I'm the first. And he said, a few seconds later, I never met a rich person who wasn't dishonest. Meaning, number one, Jews are rich. It happens to be that rich people are all ganovim, right? Are crooks, are dishonest.
Therefore.
Wow.
But I'm not saying you didn't say anything more. In other words, you do the math. You're the Jew. You're gonna that. So. This is, this was the norm. There is jealousy. The success is because they take it from others. They're taking it from others. This is what's happening. And Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch and others note that here are the roots of anti-Semitism. Here we have it. This is anti-Semitism. The Jew succeeds, and the others are jealous. They are jealous, and eventually what do they want to do? They want to hurt the Jew, and then the final result is going to be, Jew, get out of here. You don't belong here. Fine? This is the history of the Jewish people. Anti-Semitism has its roots in this week's portion, and this is a portion of Jewish history, because if you look at the end of that page in verse 20, when eventually they find new wells of spring water, new wells, and they name the wells. So in verse 20, they name one Esek, they name the second one Sitzna, they name the third one Rechovot. And the Kliyakar, the Ramban and the Kliyakar, the commentators point out that if you look at the names, again, let's show them. The last three lines on page 130. So the first word, that Esek. The first well that they find and they name was Esek, a quarrel. The second one, the next line, was Sitzna, relates to the word Satan. The third one relates to the third well is Rechovot. And Ramban points out that you should know that this is a section we're supposed to understand, that this is the history of the Jewish people. But to understand the history of the Jewish people, you have to know about our own failures. The fact that we had a Bet HaMikdash. We had this central spiritual location, but we blew it. We blew it twice. The first time because we had fights. We had Esek. Esek is Litaseki Mishu. The southern kingdom fighting with the northern kingdom. So that's Jewish history. We had too much fighting. The second well symbolizes the second temple, where there was baseless hatred. A Jew looked a little bit different than you. He thought a little bit different than you. You hated him. It was like what we call a Maseh Satan, Sitzna. That symbolizes the second temple period. But, worry not, the third temple period is Rechovot. My father would point out that if you look carefully, the first two, when we talk about the fact that they were dug, we mention there Vayachperu. It's in the plural. The first two. The last one in the last line, Vayatek Misham, when the third well is dug in verse 22, what is it? It's in the
singular.
So my father would say that's the third temple that's built by the Almighty, right? There's one. It's not built by people. It's God Almighty who will build the third temple. And the third temple is Rechovot. Rechovot. What's the significance of Rechovot? Besides the fact that some people have kids in Rechovot. When we are thankful to God, when we eat, we say, thank you, God, for the food. Thank you, God, for the land. And thank you, God, for the spiritual hub that gives meaning to all of this. Therefore, we mention we're thankful for the Mazon, Haaretz, and of course Yerushalayim. But we mention, let's say in the short version, Eretz Tova. Is Eretz Yisrael Tova? Yeah. But it's Rechava, it's broad. Now what does it mean to be broad? So you know very well that people are affected by the climate, right? Like if you live in a cold climate and come December to February, you're either kvetching or planning your trip to Florida, right? So people are impacted. Your environment does impact the personality, right? I mean, if it occurs in the animal kingdom, that species evolve based on the fact that they have to adapt to new temperatures. So it happens to us as well. There's a way of thinking. Eretz Yisrael is a broad land. It's not Egypt. Remember, they came from Egypt. Egypt, where does everyone look at a map at the central of map of the population of Egyptians in their land? It's all by the Nile. All by the Nile. Everything by the Nile. Broad country, but it's very, very narrow. Jews on the other, or the land of Israel, you have everything there. Right? People have, that's what they are amazed at, the fact that they could go skiing in the Hermon, and then a few hours later they could be down scuba diving in Eilat, right? So there's something incredible about this land that within a few hours, and you travel Yerushalayim, Tel Aviv. They're talking about this train that they're making that within a year or two, with less than a half hour, Yerushalayim, Tel Aviv. These are two cities that in any other place you would be traveling for 8 hours to even dream of seeing the contrast. But this broadness is not just physical, it's to tell you that people develop and think differently, and in Judaism, there is room for different ways of thinking. Right? There are those that are very, very spiritual and mystical, and then there are those who are very technical and logical and realistic, and Judaism and Jewish thought has room for everyone. Right? There's not one way to do it. And Eretz Yisrael is a land where it is rechava, it's broad. And the third temple is when we're going to accept that fact that there could be a Jew that looks very, very different than you. A different hat, a different kippah, whatever it is, a different way of thinking, a different attitude towards Chumash. Some people are just going to love when you give them pshetlach and chumash that are gematrios, and other people are not going to be happy unless it is simply in the text itself. But they're both fine because every person is different. Eretz Yisrael is a broad land. And we're a broad nation. Eretz Tova or Rechava. So the third Beit HaMikdash, we're only going to merit it if we are turned into broad people. Rechovot is the third Beit HaMikdash. So that's what we're being told here, because this is a section that deals with the history of the people of Israel. So Yitzchak is exiled. He's kicked out of his land. But then something odd happens afterwards. After all these, after his success with the well. So turn to page 132. Page 132. Verse 26. V'Avimelech halach elav migrar. Avimelech goes to Yitzchak. He just kicked the Jew out. And Vayomer aleim Yitzchak, in verse 27, Yitzchak Yishak, Madua batem elai. What are you guys doing here? Atem snetim oti v'tishalchonim itchem. You hated me. So in verse 28, they spell out the fact that we saw that God was with you. Okay? So the Gentile recognizes that actually their economy, right? We could go through a list of countries that were superpowers. Spain was a superpower. Get rid of the Jews, goodbye, right? And you could look into 20. Venezuela, right? You look at the history of Venezuela, what happened? And we could go through a very, very long list of countries. It used to be Portugal, right? What happens is they get rid of the Jews. You get rid of your success, your blessing. They recognize that.
The Fugu plan.
Yeah.
The Japanese
tried to bring them in, knowing that they're But now, verse 29 is one of those that you have to give Yitzchak credit for not punching Avimelech. Because look at verse 29, and you tell me how you would react. And Avimelech says to him, verse 29, and again, just before you even read this verse, envision a Jew packing everything they have and leaving with locals yelling at them, screaming at them. Perhaps you have to wear a yellow star. Imagine the experience of having to leave your home because you are a Jew. Leave your success, leave your community because you are Jewish. And now you are facing the individual who caused it all. And he says to him, and now that he realizes that it would be beneficial to have this covenant, verse 29, Im ta'asei manu ra'ah, in other words, we expect from you that there should be, some kind of oath that if you do evil to us, kasher lo nega'neucha, in other words, just as we didn't harm you, ve'ka'asher asinu imecha rak tov, because we only did good for you. We were so nice to you. And we sent you b'shalom. So in other words, you will be blessed if you'll be nice to us and our nation because we treated you so well. Asinu imecha rak tov. Avimelech, what is happening here? So there's the Beis Halevi. The Beis Halevi is a Soloveitchik, the first of Soloveitchik dynasty, even though they would tell you that it goes back, but he was a very significant individual, passed away in 1892. And he writes, he calls Avimelech the first politician. He calls him a politician. And what he is saying to Yitzchak is the following: you should know that the locals, they were really out to get you. In other words, we really protected you. The local Philistines, they're primitive people, and they saw you as a successful individual. They were out to cut you up to pieces. We felt a responsibility as leaders, me and Fickle there, Mr. Pickle, and we felt that the only way you could survive is if you leave. So remember our kindness. We were saving you. We basically asked you to leave a land that was given to you by God for your sake, so that there shall be peace. So this idea of moving you out of your homes was for your good. That's how you have peace. This is what Avimelech is saying. Now, here we have the roots of anti-Semitism. And it seems to be that the roots of anti-Semitism are found when you have people, when you have individuals, when you have superpowers, telling the Jews, you know what, there'll be peace if all you do is compromise and move out of your home that was given to you by God. And if you don't want to do it, we're going to save you. Save Israel. Have you heard this title? It's an incredible thing. The idea of we have to save Israel from itself. Save Israel from itself. We have in Washington a president that is really concerned, and he's going to save Israel from itself. Right? Netanyahu doesn't know how to save Israel. But the Axelrods of the world, right, and the Rami Manuels, right, and the Ben Rhodes, they are the ones that are going to save Israel from itself. It's interesting that there's a lot of talk now about anti-Semitism. Why is it so much in the media, anti-Semitism? Because there's an individual by the name of Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon. Now, Steve Bannon, they call him the alt-right, Breitbart media, and he is a top advisor for the Trump campaign, and now is going to be playing a significant role in the White House. Now, I'm not telling you that I would invite him for Kiddush here, but he has been labeled an anti-Semite. Why was he labeled an anti-Semite? Because he is the editor of Breitbart News. In Breitbart News, there was a headline where an author called Bill Kristol, not Billy Crystal, Bill Kristol, and he called him a Republican spoiler, a renegade Jew. Ooh. In Breitbart News, there was someone who called Kristol a renegade Jew. That's an anti-Semite. So you imagine, okay, so who's the author must be some, Ibrahim al-Fahid or someone? Because if it's anti-Semitic, right, written by David Horowitz. David Horowitz wrote the article. Now, when you read the article, what David Horowitz was saying basically was as follows, that Bill Kristol was unhappy with Trump. So he was trying to hurt the Trump candidacy, which would have brought Hillary Clinton to the White House. This is what he's arguing. Hillary Clinton would have continued with the policies of Barack Obama. And what's going to happen? You're going to go ahead and cause harm to the Jews in Israel. And he writes in the article, half of world Jewry now lives in Israel. And the enemies whom Obama and Hillary have empowered, Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hezbollah, ISIS, Hamas, have openly sworn to exterminate the Jews. To weaken the only party that stands between the Jews and their annihilation is a political miscalculation so great and a betrayal so profound as to not be easily forgiven. are these words of a person that is an anti-Semite? Is David Horowitz what he's basically saying is, don't weaken a candidate that's going to bring in another candidate that's not going to be good for the Jews. But he is considered the absurdity of the media. Bannon's right? Steve Bannon is an anti-Semite because of the fact that he allowed Horowitz to write in it. What was Horowitz writing, basically? The Jew was writing that it's important to take care of the welfare of the Jews in Israel, and Bill Kristol was not doing his job. On the other hand, you have someone like Keith Ellison, who is a Muslim, and there are those who are pushing that he should become the head of the DNC, very powerful position among the Democrats. And he has a background with the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And we know very well what their intentions are. So we're in a world where anti-Semitism can mean anything, right? Because that's what the media decides. What we are being told here, that the roots of anti-Semitism are basically, the first case of recorded anti-Semitism is basically pressuring a Jew to leave his homeland. That is anti-Semitism. When there are policies that hurt the Jews in Israel, when you go ahead and pressure Israel to give up territory, and it has never brought peace, right? We all want peace, but we also know how to read history. When we read that history and realize that is anti-Semitism. That is a key piece of information that we are told here, and that's what the Beis Halevi is telling us here. He is that Avimelech is a politician. I'm doing it for your good, because that's what he's trying to say. It was only for your good. I would never ever do it to you. The masses, right? You're in a difficult region there. In that neighborhood, I highly recommend that for your sake and for your peace, I'm going to go ahead and take care of you, and I will save Israel from itself. Now, the fact that Yitzchak does not punch Avimelech, but rather works with him, and there's a covenant. And listen to this. Vayas lahem mishteh, verse 30, can you believe it? He made a feast. Is there a lesson from that as well? Is there a lesson? You know, there is a well-known statement. Halacha biyadua, this is a rabbinic statement, that it's like a halacha. Esav soneh leYaakov. Esav hates Yaakov. So you have to realize that all this that is mentioned here, it is sandwiched in the middle of the portion that is all about Esav. That is because this is what Esav becomes. He adopts this philosophy. The hatred of the Jew is adopted. It becomes Esav. So when earlier we were talking about the external positive sides of Esav, now we understand what his core was. His core was that he could produce a grandchild that is Amalek. That's Esav's grandchild. And Amalek is Haman, and Haman is Hitler. It all is this Esav deciding that this is my core. Hatred towards the Jew. Hatred towards the Jewish message. This is what we are being told here. But we are also being told how to react to it. Remember, Yitzchak does not say, I want nothing to do with you. He worked with him. It's interesting. There's this statement. Esav soneh leYaakov. Esav becomes, right, the epitome of Jewish hatred. But now, this statement could be problematic. And there was a great rabbi in North America by the name of Rav Henkin. You've heard of Rav Henkin, passed away, I think, in the 1970s. And he tells us that you should know that when it comes to anti-Semitism, true, it is not always rational, and we have no control over it, but we still have the responsibility of doing our part to try to minimize it. Don't allow something, supernatural to justify your behavior. And there are those who do it. Oh, the non-Jew hates me, so I could do whatever I want. I could drive any way I want, right? I could interact with them. I could go ahead and ignore the laws because they hate me anyway. Rav Henkin says that's a destructive way of thinking. And he notes that the big problem is, number one, when Jews are not careful with their wealth. When they show off, right? Imagine in a neighborhood where there are Gentiles that have less. And he says that they show off their wealth. That is a problem. Because indeed, your success has to be behester, bechadrei chadarim, velo neged ha'umot. Meaning, don't allow this concept to justify your behavior. Right? I remember being at a wedding at one of these airports, one of these hotels by the airport, a Jewish wedding, and you saw people in the lobby looking at the Jewish event, and you get a feeling that their ayn is not an ayn tova. You get a feeling that they recognize the fact that this is quote unquote a Jewish wedding. we have to think twice about such things. Not that we have no right to celebrate, but we have to be mindful of it, he tells us. And then he tells us you should know. The worst thing is kishemevazim otam, when we don't treat the Gentiles with proper respect. And he says that you should know, even when on the surface it seems like we're dealing as soneh, efshar lehavcho leohev. We have the ability, when we treat them with dignity, we see the fact that they are human beings, we have the ability to change their attitude. And he ends up by saying, avon plili, it's a crime. From the metifima petpetanim, from the babbling preachers. He's talking about other rabbis. Shedorshim tamid, which always get up and say, halacha she'esav soneh leYaakov. Preachers who are basically saying, the non-Jews, they're going to always hate us. And he says that that's foolish. It is foolish. Zeneged ha'emet, this is against the truth. V'neged chachamenu zichronam lebracha, and it is neged mikra, this is against Jewish tradition. Jewish tradition is, yes, we do understand that there's anti-Semitism, but you have the responsibility as a committed Jew to do your best to try to minimize it. Act like a mensch. This is what he tells us, and this is what we're being told when anti-Semitism is introduced here. And the anti-Semitism that originates in the land of Israel, with those telling us we don't have a right to the land of Israel. Nevertheless, let's be inspired by Yitzchak, that Yitzchak could sit down with a meal with them, treat them with dignity. And perhaps this is a lesson that's an important one, and that's what Rav Henkin is telling us. Thank you very much, and everyone have a good day.